Welcome to Cyber Sentries from Cyberproof on True Story FM. I'm your host, John Richards. Here we explore the transformative potential of AI for cloud security. This episode is brought to you by Cyberproof, a leading managed security services provider. Paladin Cloud is now part of Cyberproof's expanded cloud security capabilities. Learn more at cyberproof.com. On this episode, Sherman Williams, managing partner at AIN Ventures, joins me. We discuss the importance of identifying the right problems to solve with AI, how using AI as a tool should be top of mind for any industry, and new AI threats on the rise. Let's dive in. Sherman, thank you so much for coming on the episode today. It's so nice to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Before we dive in, I would love to hear about your background. I know you're investing, you're reviewing a lot of companies in the AI space now. And so how do you get to that spot? What's your journey been? I saw on your profile, you started out as a veteran, and now you're tackling this area and looking into such a new technology. What's your journey been to get here?
I would say, bottom line up front, my journey has been circuitous. I think it's been one that's kind of been led by intellectual curiosity, which is backed up by just a ton of hard work, right? And so that's kind of been my journey here. So I'm a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, and my co-founder is a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. We came together about 5 years ago with an idea that in the world of dual-use technology have both government and commercial application, it made sense to source the thoughts of the end users of that equipment, which are typically officers or people, folks in the military, or folks in the intelligence community or law enforcement. And so we're the graduates of these unique institutions, the academies, and we brought together graduates from the other 3 academies. There's a total of 5 U.S. military service academies that are 100% funded by Congress, and in order to kind of source their thoughts when it comes to performing diligence on companies, but also sourcing companies and providing post-investment support to those companies. So that if you think about that through line of sourcing, diligence, post-investment support, it was the thought process that a group of academy grads would have a unique perspective. So we started off with that and did syndicate deals, mainly one-off deals for a couple of years. And then in 2022, we set out to raise an investment fund with captive capital, a dedicated fund to invest into these dual-use technologies that both government and commercial application. All of those technologies fall within the critical emerging technologies list. It's put out by the White House several years ago, and there's been some slight modifications, but it's largely the same as it originally was. And anyone can Google that, the critical emerging technologies list. So we finished fundraising for our fund in 2024. It took a little bit of time for the first fund, grew a journey, but it was good. And we have been investing out of that fund now for some time. We were investing as we were going. We've got about 20 some odd companies in the portfolio to date. They range in multiple of the critical emerging technology list areas, from life sciences to space technology to artificial intelligence, machine learning developer tools to sustainability tech. We've got a pure cyber company in the portfolio. So we look across multiple technologies within that realm of that CET list. And the key to that list is those are technologies that the U.S. government, for various purposes, has determined it wants to see. The U.S. government wants to be able to use those technologies, basically. And the U.S. government understands that to best use those technologies, it needs to do so in the context of a company, right? And a company can deliver that service to the U.S. government. And so the U.S. government will give companies that are building those technologies in those specific areas, those critical emerging technology list areas, will give them non-dilutive funding and also potentially be an initial customer of that company's products. That company's technological product. And so, but what the U.S. government does is it looks for private investors to come in at some point to come in alongside it in order to give the company the financial wherewithal to continue to grow, so that it can, in a sustained way, be a service to the government, right? Or provide a service to the government, I should say. And so we are that kind of private ride-along capital. That's how we think about it. And we invest in companies that are actively engaging with the government at the time of our investment, or, we've invested in with companies that have no dealings with the government, and then we're going to work to help them have dealings with the government eventually, right? So we attack at both sides. So we have several companies in our portfolio that have hardly any dealings, if any dealings with the government, but we say, hey, eventually governments, we put our hat on, our former government hat on, and say, hey, the government's eventually going to want this if you can actually do it.
Well, that's a cool thing about kind of being in the spot that you are, is that you are almost like a leading indicator of where the market, where trends are going, because you're hearing about, as a consumer, I could see a lot of, AI tech, the technology coming out. But since you're investing before that really almost gets fully productized, you're seeing this ahead of time. And obviously, as a consumer, I'm not on the government or federal side to see that at all. So I've seen a big proliferation of everybody's looking to figure out how to do AI. But what does that look like from the investment space? Is everybody need an AI angle right now? Are you seeing some really unique applications kind of showing up for this? What are the trends you're seeing there?
Technology is a tool. It's an amazing tool in your toolkit for something that you're trying to achieve. AI is a subsegment of technology writ large, right? And it is simply a tool in a toolkit. And so if you ask somebody, do you want to run a more efficient organization that's much more productive and makes more money, that has more net profit, than you would do with some other process? I think everyone would say yes. Well, hey, in order to do that, here's a tool that you need to use. That tool is called AI. Sometimes people overhype things, or they get too excited about things. But I really do think that AI should be seen as another tool in a larger toolkit. And it's a big tool. It's a tool that you may not know how to fully use yet, right? And there's other iterations of the tool that the company is going to be sending along later, right? It's almost like a subscription tool, and they're going to send you an improved tool. Next thing you know, you're using one kind of screwdriver to do everything in the house, and it also has a hammer on it, and you can pull out nails, and it can It also has a remote. I don't know, to turn on the lights. Like the world's greatest multifunctional tool, Swiss Army knife, right? Whatever. And so AI to me just brings about efficiency and productivity. It increases productivity dramatically, and that's what it's good for to me. I try not to overhype it, and there are certain instances where it's not necessary. I think that the areas where it's not necessary, depending on what you do, are fairly few and far between, because AI is a tool. It's a situation, instead of the company, to keep on my metaphor, sending you a new tool every year, the company's going to be sending you a new tool like once a month, right? The improvements are so rapid. And so that's how I treat AI. Should everyone use AI? I think that everyone should think about some form of artificial intelligence if they want to run a more efficient organization, be more productive, and potentially produce greater profit. Yes. Yeah. And I think everyone would, if you frame it in that way, everyone would agree with that.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen a few things where folks are saying my business model is the tool versus maybe solving a problem that you use that tool to solve. Are you seeing that where people are like, there's a flood of folks that are just like, here's AI, let's use that? Or are entrepreneurs smart enough and they're saying, no, I'm still going for the problem, and here's how I use AI in that space?
So what you're asking is two different things. So the people who are just flooding the market with AI, what they're doing is they're flooding the market with two things: either AI ML DevTools, where we mainly invest, which are basically tools for software engineers, or even to bring a technical element to a non-technical team, right? And when I say for software engineers, it's to help them go home earlier. That's what I think about AI ML DevTools. It is a tool to help people go home early. And then there's DevTools, and then there's application layer AI. Application layer AI is if you're working in a specific industry, I have an AI tool to help you be more efficient, be more productive, and produce greater profits, right? And so that is a more of an application layer tool that's meant to go to an actual company. And so I think that, are there people who are just producing AI, flooding the market with these application layer tools? I don't necessarily see a flood in the market of dev tools. There's a lot of dev tools that are out there. They're coming. But there were a lot, before this, there was DevSecOps that was heavily being a lot of people were building it that way, or were building those kinds of companies. Have I seen an uptick? Yes, but has it been overwhelming for me? Not really. I mean, I've been now for application layer AI, yes, I've been seeing a ton there. The problem with application layer AI is a lot of the large language model companies are constantly building out their portfolio suite, or to keep this metaphor, are continuously adding elements to their tool, and they're able to do what your application layer AI company is able to do within like 3 to 6 months when you started your company. So they completely destroy your business model, right? Not destroy a business model, but they bring up, that's not true. They don't destroy a business model. I'll take that back. What they do is they bring a tremendous amount of competition to the market. Everyone knows perfect competition creates zero profits, right? And that large language model company may have an easier time to distribute. They may have an easier way to distribute and get to the potential customer than your smaller application layer AI company. That's kind of the taxonomy and the context / framework mental framework that I use when looking at these companies. With respect to the entrepreneur that's in the wild, that's building and just trying to solve a problem, it's up to them what they choose. Do they want to have some dev tool products for the technical team to help them move faster? Do they want to have an application layer AI product to help their company move faster? They will march with their feet. I think that because AI brings about a certain level of efficiency, productivity, and can increase profits, I think that every single entrepreneur should be looking at embedding AI into their processes for sure, right? But with that being said, depending on what kind of company you're building as an entrepreneur, when I think about people, I don't think about building a company. I don't think about it in that way when I think about an entrepreneur. I think about an entrepreneur solving a problem. Those are two different things, actually. And the best companies are solving an acute problem. So you have an acute problem that you're solving for, and per that, you should be bringing in a variety of different AI tools to help you move faster, operate more efficiently, and do so with greater profits, net profits, in order to solve that problem. And again, that's how I think about this.
That's a helpful perspective there. I like this analogy. So you also mentioned some DevSecOps there as like the previous trend. As you're looking at specifically AI, but you're considering it from a security perspective, I assume there's even more that you have to think about when you're thinking about like government contracts, things like that. And there's already this push-pull of public models versus a private or a local model or an open source model. Does that matter when you're looking at what's going to have longevity, especially in these important security areas? Or are there key things where you're like, hey, if this is a local open source model, we've got a lot more space to move because we don't have to worry about data leakage or things like that. Is that a factor when you're assessing these companies?
Yeah. So from an AI and cyber standpoint, when I think about what can the tool of AI do, it can take in voluminous amounts of information, find normal distribution curves, and start to identify and find normal distribution curves with respect to that large voluminous data set, those data lakes. And it can start to find patterns there. And based off patterns, it can develop confidence intervals and predict what may happen next, right? I mean, if you think about a large language model, what is it fundamentally? A generative pre-trained transformer does next token prediction in the form of words, right? And so that's fundamentally first principles, what it does. That paper, I can't remember the name of the paper from Google in 2017, from Google, that talked about transformers. That was like one of the seminal papers in the large language model space, right? And so, is there a place for them? Open source versus cold source? Let me hop to that portion of the question since I set the scene on what we're thinking through now. As far as how to go about doing this, open source versus cold source, I mean, it depends. What I think that there are elements. You have RAGs, you have other things where you can leverage a large language model, but have your kind of own instance and have a lot of information there protected, right? And not necessarily go out into the wild. Yeah, I mean, certain industries, healthcare, defense, government, insurance, anything where you have information you don't necessarily want to be out in the wild and necessarily trained on, like personal identifiable information and all that kind of stuff, or for government things that they deem to be classified. Yeah, they're going to want something either on-prem or in a secure cloud, right? Which the government has been doing for quite some time. And they're going to want their models to run in that way, right? So yes, you're gonna have that element, but then you're gonna have people who just don't need that. Like it really doesn't matter, and because the government and insurance and healthcare and all that, they're gonna have to pay more money for that too, right? There's gonna be a slight now that cost is coming down, but it's still gonna be marginally more than someone who's just using a standard model, right? For sure. Now, where do I fall out? Open source versus closed source models? That's another question you ask. If you really think about it, you ask several questions in one. Open source versus closed source models. That's a great question. Bottom line up front, I'm more of a believer in open source models. So I'm more of a Yann LeCun believer from what Llama's doing at Meta than I am where OpenAI was probably a year ago. OpenAI has since opened up, and I think they're moving to be a little bit more open source. I think if I'm not mistaken, I think they talked about revealing their weightings in their model. Obviously, Llama clearly does that. Famously, DeepSeek in China does that. There's been, I'm much more of an open source person from a model standpoint. But I do think that there are certain industries that are going to want some sort of closed garden wall or whatever, right? Some sort of wall for their information. And there's an entrance to let in more information from others. Like, why would you wouldn't want to hold out information from others? You want to incorporate that, but keep your stuff out so it can't be trained on. That's how I think about this kind of playing. And companies that are working on that to enable you to keep your wall garden, but have an entrance for other people's information, but keep yours in that garden. And that's how the model will work, right? I think that those companies stand and makes a good amount of money for the time being. So that's where I stand on all of that. But at the end of the day, I do want to say something that if you're an entrepreneur solving a problem, an acute problem ideally, I wouldn't get too caught up in what, even though it's going to look dire right now, I wouldn't get wildly caught up in what the big language model companies are doing. People get disrupted all the time. Big companies get disrupted all the time. And fundamentally, if you as an entrepreneur understand the problem extremely well and better than anyone else, someone sitting in San Francisco, remember most of the large language model companies are within like 50 square miles of each other in the Bay Area. Right?
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
Like, if you understand what, I don't know, if you have a software company for cattle ranchers or something like that, and you sit in Texas, right? Or you have a software company for, I don't know, dock workers, or I don't know, some sort of problem there with dealing with shipping or whatever, and you happen to sit in the Port of Newark or Baltimore, right? Or Long Beach or LA or Houston, right? And you understand the problem better than anyone. I think that you're going to be able to move faster and be more specific and particular in your product delivery, which means that these people are going to be willing to pay you versus them being willing to pay the large language model companies. And that's what folks need to focus on. Don't get so enamored by the technology. Get enamored by, I know this problem better than anyone, and I'm pulling an amalgamation, just a range of tools to answer this problem. Because ideally what you'll see is, for time, low-hanging fruit-wise, you'll see the large language model companies building out tools that subsequently disrupt people's potential custom companies. But what eventually you'll see is, where I think the market will eventually shift, this is my opinion, is you'll see the large language model companies almost being like an app store.
Okay.
That an entrepreneur that's solving the acute problem in a specific vertical can take that tool from the large language model company, add on some things. The App Store, you can't really do this, but this is a little bit different. And that's why that's why open source, I think, will win. An entrepreneur will be able to add on tools that's help to specifically meet that problem. They'll take the tools from the large language model companies. They'll add to it. It's in a way that they can specifically solve the problem in that vertical. And those folks in that vertical, those customers are willing to pay for that, right? Because otherwise, when they grab the stuff from the large language model company, they got to adapt it themselves. And they're like, this is dumb. I'd rather give someone 15, 20 bucks, you know? And that's how my mind thinks. I'll give you a quick analogy. I often think, you know, I like steak, right? And I like to shop. I like to cook. You know, sometimes meat prices go up. And I'm just like, well, shoot, if I'm paying $30 to $35 a pound for a bone-in ribeye, I mean, I might as well go to a restaurant. I mean, the steak cost me $50, $60. I'll give you $15 to $20 to cook the steak for me, right? I mean, okay. Like, I mean, that's just like high school. You're giving your buddy some money for gas. Like, whatever, right? I mean, you know, like, now if it's the steak, if it's on sale and the steak is, you know, $18 to $20 a pound, well, yeah, I don't want to pay anyone $30 to $40. I'll cook it myself, right? And that's kind of the psychological thought process for that customer. Look, I can go get OpenAI or whatever for $20 or use Deep Ursa for $200, but I got to adapt some stuff. Things are always changing. I don't understand what's going on. I got to have someone full time to do this, or I can pay this other company $30 to $40, $50 a month and they do it for me. You know, I'm going to pay $20 anyway. So what's another $10 or whatever, you know, and maybe the price point is even higher. Right.
Well, it depends on how acute that pain is that you've talked about solving.
I tell everyone, pricing is, and I'm going on a tangent here, but pricing is a first order derivative of the pain that you're solving for.
Mm.
So if you have cancer and I have a drug that can cure your cancer, you're willing to pay all the money that you have in the world and all the money you have access to cure that cancer to stay alive, probably. Right? Some people may not be willing to do that, but probably. Now, if you've got a hangnail and you just need to like let it'll be all right, then you're like, I'm not willing to spend $1 million on this thing. Like I'll figure this out though, you know, rub something on it and I'll be all right, you know, whatever, right? And so pricing is always a first order derivative of the pain that you're dealing with.
Yeah, no, I talked to somebody once and we were talking about something that would save back to your earlier discussion about DevTools, was the idea of like, this will save your developers can go home earlier. And they're like, great, but I'm not willing to pay for that because I'm already paying them. I don't care. You know, that wasn't a strong enough problem to motivate them. So I see that.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, speaking of like that acute pain and the problem in the security space, what are you seeing people trying to solve with AI that you think is really promising right now?
In the security space, what are people trying to solve with AI? I mean, there's a range of things. Yeah, I mean, that's such a large question.
Yeah, but I don't know if there's something maybe in your portfolio or something that you've seen and you're like, these guys have really seen something.
So we have a company in our portfolio, Phalanx, that is helping people operate in a zero trust environment. And I'm big on that in the sense of your information has likely already been hacked. You want to be able to operate in that kind of world, but your people already have access to your systems. So they do something where they encrypt pretty much everything. And there's a key matching thing that in order to decrypt things, right? So even if someone breaks into your stuff, you assume that people have already broken into your stuff. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like you already have everything encrypted, right? Another key, I'll just throw out a couple of areas. The whole deepfake area is going to increasingly become a problem. It's going to enhance the quality of phishing exercises that folks do. From an email, setting up a fake company with a fake website very quickly, AI-generated images of humans, AI-generated voices. That's going to be a massive issue when it comes to security. From it being a problem standpoint, that's, I think, some of the key issues.
And do you think to combat that's going to require another tier of AI that can identify that and try to stop it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you dig a bigger wall, I'm gonna dig a ton under it, right? It's gonna be always an offense defense thing. I mean, it is normal for humans to try to steal. and do bad things. There are bad people that exist in the world. There are bad actors. And those bad actors are doing what they're supposed to do. They're acting bad. It is your job to ensure those bad actors do not win and use every tool at your disposal to keep those bad actors from winning. 100%. So I don't get upset that the bad actors are doing what they do. My job is to protect myself, and our government's job is to take offensive action to make those bad actors go away and deter future bad actors from acting, right? And so that's my thought process there. Other than the kind of deep fake kind of world, I think that from a good side of the house, you're seeing AI a lot for anomaly detection. It can take on large, voluminous amounts of information. It can sense when there's a problem or anomaly, and it can act accordingly, right? That's a great thing where you're seeing AI being used. Where else is AI being used from a good standpoint? I mean, I think that from a bad standpoint, one interesting thing that I've been seeing is, bad actors are basically harvesting a ton of information. So here's the issue: even if your files are encrypted, what you're seeing is what the bad actors will do is they're harvesting information with the idea that eventually they can use quantum engineering in order to decrypt your information and have it. And so you're seeing erase within quantum engineering in order to encrypt files that way, right? So even if they do have that eventually, that capability, they can't get your stuff, right? And so that's yet another thing that I'm seeing. And that's an area I'm heavily focused on. I've been looking at a lot now recently. Another big thing I think about is, so with the quote unquote vibe coding, you're gonna see an explosion of people that are able to code. And the way I think about it is, there's a good analogy here. And let me go through this. The analogy is almost, what was it? Gutenberg had the printing press, and I think it was the 1500s, right? And it calls, that there was a lot of things that occurred after that that actually shook society, actually to its core, right? You start to see religious wars, et cetera, because you have Martin Luther post that thing on the church because he wanted reforms in the Catholic Church, right? You have to remember, back in the day, I mean, heck, even after that, there were a lot of people that couldn't read. So people in society, they were relying on a king or feudal lord or the church where people could read as some sort of educated aristocracy in order to inform them, right? And you saw society be shook when people could read and could digest information, right? That's a rough analogy for what you're going to see with vibe coding on these coding tools, because you're going to see people be able to build their own stuff. And I really think about, like, I'm too young, and you're probably too young too. When the internet was really getting going, when it was an ARPA project back in the 70s, the idea of Internet 1.0 was that you actually controlled your own information. You controlled your own kind of own fate. What happened was the internet became very difficult to navigate for your common person. So you have companies that built these walled gardens, to borrow a term from earlier, made it a lot easier to use, but they keep your information, right? With vibe coding, I love anything that brings about a return back to Internet 1.0. That's why I'm fascinated by the crypto world, right? Do I believe in it completely? Meh, right? But the concept of blockchain and the ethos of controlling your information and being able to monetize it, I love that, right? So let me bring that to what my point here with vibe coding. The code editors and GitHub Copilot, Replit, et cetera, those are going to be amazing, and they're going to open up the ability for people to code writ large and create their own apps. And it'll be amazing what humans come up with. It'll be amazing. You're creating a platform, but the problem is that a lot of times, either with the code editor is using it because it's using the concept of a large language model, it's going out into the wild. With that, or what the person is trying to do, they a lot of times will be taking existing functions from open source libraries. and how secure those open source libraries, and are there holes in those libraries? And I know for a fact there are government efforts in the United States government in order to sign off on some of those libraries, even though there's been a Cambrian explosion of them. So it's going to be really difficult. But what are the potential holes in those libraries? And that's something that I do worry about from a cyber standpoint. You're constantly coding and taking from these open source libraries from GitHub or whatever have you. I mean, if you're not that sophisticated, you don't have a clue. And maybe the large language model is not able to spot that. It may need to be trained. There's a business opportunity there. It may need to be, for anyone listening, it may need to be trained in such a way that it tells you, hey, this is actually going to cause a problem. Or the way you built these functions, this class in Python, whatever, we need to build yet another AI agent to constantly check this and make sure you're not penetrating it, because there's no good way to do it, right? And so that world where you're opening up to the way that this analogy compares with the whole thing with the printing press is, while you're opening up the world for a lot of people to code, you're also opening up the world for a lot more exploitation and vulnerabilities, because you're going to have bad actors. And that's going to shake the coding community, society, people who build things online, similar to how the Gutenberg press and the printing press shook society, because I can read what my priest is telling me, what my feudal lord or what this king is telling you, this doesn't make any, I don't agree, right? Like, cause I can read too, right? And so, right. And so like, there's going to be some reverberations. And I think that eventually, I think it was a good thing that people can read. And I think it's a good thing that you open up coding for more and more people. That's a great thing, actually. But you're going to have, there's going to be a whole world of cyber design where you can vibe code, but you can also ensure that the code you're laying down is secure, and or what those potential vulnerabilities are, considering you coded this way. And I just want to make you aware. And then, you can build some other security tools on top of that to constantly check your processes to ensure things are secure. So those are, I kind of was a stream of consciousness, but those are some of the key areas that I'm seeing in AI and things that are interesting. Like,
yeah, no, that's so helpful. And what I'm hearing too is like, we can expect to see this spike in Log4j style errors down the road as everybody is building on this. So as you said, how do we get ahead of that?
100%. I mean, and then as everyone operates online and you move to digital currencies and you move to, I mean, dude, I go to ATM a couple times a year. I just don't have to, right? I mean, if that. I mean, probably 2 or 3 times a year I go to ATM, whatever. And you're going to need so there's a company called Cloaked, CLOAKED, that I use. It just ensures that my information is not with all these data brokers. It removes it.
Yeah.
I can use fake phone numbers and fake emails when I sign up for stuff, right? So it can protect me at the core, at the root. And so I'm really excited about things like that. As we consistently operate online, a lot of commerce, et cetera, is done online. Because if you think about it fundamentally, commerce done online and things of that nature is a little bit less friction, has a bit less friction than a lot of things done in person in certain instances, right?
Yeah, well, the one-click easy button to just check out immediately.
Yeah, exactly. Versus me walking around a store, right? Right. And so, that's something that I think about. And those are just a kind of a range of areas where I think, AI could be used. So.
Yeah. Well, this has been really enlightening. Thank you so much, Sherman, for coming on here, sharing your expertise. Before we wrap up, anything you want to shout out or anything you want to promote, kind of what's going on? Where can folks find you?
Absolutely. Our fund is AI in Ventures. Our website is ainventures.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Sherman Williams II. So I think I'm one of probably the only, and millions upon millions of people on the social graph that is LinkedIn, the world's largest social graph. I think I might be the only Sherman Williams II. I could be mistaken now.
You were very easy to find. So yes, just search for Sherman.
Yeah. And then look, I'll give folks my email. It's Sherman@ainventures.com. If you only do not ping me if you're a service provider. You can shoot your shot, but it's going to get deleted. But if you have a company that you're building in the cyberspace, I'm really, really interested. Another thing I didn't mention is, being able to do cyber on the edge and not in the cloud on edge devices. That's a big thing that we've been looking at. And so I'm happy to take a look at the company and assess whether or not it makes sense for us. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Sherman. Definitely check out AI Ventures. We'll have some links in the show notes for you guys that want to jump over there and check it out. Thanks again for being on here, for sharing your expertise. We're so glad to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast is made possible by Cyberproof, a leading managed security services provider helping organizations manage cyber risk through advanced threat intelligence, exposure management, and cloud security. Paladin Cloud is now part of Cyberproof's portfolio of solutions, extending their capabilities in cloud security posture management and risk prioritization. From proactive threat hunting to managed detection and response, Cyberproof helps enterprises reduce risk, improve resilience, and stay ahead of emerging threats. Learn more at cyberproof.com. Thank you for tuning in to Cyber Sentries. I'm your host, John Richards. This has been a production of True Story FM, audio engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Amit Sagi. You can find all the links in the show notes. We appreciate you downloading and listening to this show. Take a moment and leave a like and review. It helps us get the word out. We'll be back right here on Cyber Sentries.